What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we're going to be reviewing Cynthia Frelund's first 2025 NFL mock draft. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I make content like this every single day. Below my face is my board. It is continuously being updated as we continue to watch players both from the Senior Bowl as well as the rest of the entire class. So super excited for that. Just feel free to hop along, and you guys get to see all 22 clips over my X page that support my decisions. I aim to be honest, more than 100% correct, because I'd rather learn from my mistakes and get better and better rather than just bullshitting you about my actual opinions. So that's why I'll be different from every other person's board. I owe you guys transparency. And, big fan of Cynthia Frelund. She's actually somebody who is willing to be unique and take actual curveball approaches without actually seeming like it's a bunch of BS. So, it's kind of a breath of fresh air in the media industry. I'm obviously, based on the title alone, not going to perfectly agree with anything, if not everything, if not anything. But, it's a nice breath of fresh air. Got a lot of respect for Cynthia. So let's get into this. Let's have a great time. And a special thing at the end of the show, we are actually going to be having Taylor Elgersma. I can't pronounce names to save my life. Taylor Elgersma, the Canadian Tom Brady, essentially, coming on the show. So I hope you guys do enjoy that as well. But stay tuned to the end for that. Let's have a great time here. Starting out with the number 1 overall selection. Titans go Travis Hunter. They go after the player that is, by a lot of people's calculations, kind of called the... why am I forgetting English words all of a sudden? It is the generational player. So, I'm not a huge fan of Travis Hunter to that degree, especially when you label him in that regard. I think he's a very, very, very good player. Very good player. You're not going to miss with Travis Hunter unless you are expecting him to be a generational player. But, taking him at 1, I don't think is a really big issue. I think he fits right into what Tyler Boyd was at his prime. And then you also have that defensive back capability as well, if you do want to transition him more over to that as as his tenure progresses there in Tennessee. Cleveland Browns go Abdul Carter. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, Myles Garrett most likely going to be bye-bye. And, I don't think that there is a trade in here, which it's on me. I should have read it if it were. But I do like the idea of being able to react to this live. But Abdul Carter, he ended up moving up to number 2 on my board to reflect what I think of him as a designated pass rusher. He is number 10 overall on my board, if not as an overall edge rusher. At number 3, you got the Giants going Cam Ward. It's my dream location for Cam Ward. I think that, he needs to go with a coach that knows how to maximize playmaking potential. I don't think Brian Callahan is that guy. I think that Brian Dable is the one to put him in the better situation. And I think that's best for both Cam Ward, best for the organization that drafts Cam Ward, as well as for the fans who are going to be watching him. At number 4, the Patriots go Will Campbell. I'm not the biggest Will Campbell guy. He is, obviously going to be a very solid offensive lineman regardless. But I would say that I have my concerns with spatial awareness, arm length, etc. And I don't think that he is a bad player by any stretch of the imagination. I personally do believe, though, that the Patriots should be trying to focus away from offensive tackle at the top of the draft. I love Josh Simmons to death. I don't think after his injury he is worth this range. And that's coming from me, where pre-injury, that's all those grades with a plus are pre-injury grades. He ended up having a top 5 grade for me. I think he's fantastic. But continuing on, we got the Jaguars going Jahdae Barron at number 5 overall. Ooh. Okay, so you guys know my opinion. Jahdae doesn't usually even potentially make into the first on some of my mocks, which I know there's a ton of love for Jahdae out there, and I do love him. I do. It's interesting because when you end up liking a player and just realize that it's not as much as the consensus, it is a little bit of a letdown. And I think the Jaguars absolutely should be going corner, but Jahdae being sub 6 foot, hinted at having short arms, hinting at not being able to have the ability to truly play boundary man corner in the NFL. He is a pretty much zone/slot player, which I think the slot has, Jerry Jones is going to be that future there. So, and Jahdae doesn't have the physical capabilities, in my opinion, that you're looking for to pair up with Tyson Campbell. So I'd push back pretty heavily on that. I like the position, not the player. Number 6, the Vegas Raiders go Tyler Booker. I love Tyler Booker. You look at where he's at on my board, even factoring in positional value, I have him as my number 11 player in the entire class, which is insane. But Tyler Booker at number 6, For a team that is not desperate for interior offensive line, it's again, they ended up, the Vegas Raiders didn't necessarily need a tight end last year. They went after best player available, but this is a little bit different. I don't think this moves the needle. And number 6 overall pick for a team that has noticeable holes needs to move the needle. And especially in a deep interior offensive line class, you could snipe someone who is a top 20 player, most likely in the second. That's just, it is what it is. You need to go after a corner as well, potentially a quarterback. Obviously, we're going to not even talk about the Shedeur Sanders of it all, but I just think that the value of Tyler Booker on this offense, regardless of how good he is, does not remotely come close to to what would actually be, if you chose something else. So opportunity cost makes it not worth it, in my opinion. Not a fan of that pick myself, but again, appreciate the balls to go for it. There obviously is going to be, like, it's better than a 2-line response. So, I've made several different picks for several different teams, and there's going to be several different people who will not agree with any of them that I've done. So, like, again, the NFL draft has a way of humbling us. Every time we think there's a great move for a team, like last year was the first one where we all kind of got a general gist of what should happen. And so it's understandable, but guard necessarily is not something that I see, apart from like Quentin Nelson being this high. Jets getting Will Johnson's fantastic. I mean, imagine that. Johnson, Gardner are my 2 top rated corners of all time. Again, pretty limited sample size in terms of guys who actually got into the grading system, but Will Johnson on the Jets would be my biggest dream for them in this draft. Panthers going Mykel Williams at 8. I've seen plenty of people selecting Mykel to Carolina. I'm not against it. I would say that I would prefer Mason Graham to pair up with Derek Brown. I like that. But Mykel Williams prototypically has like that type of build of player who has that potential, does usually go in the top 15. I mean, usually it goes even higher, but Mykel was dealing with a high ankle sprain this year, and he got better and better as the health improved. And I wasn't a big Mykel guy coming into the year, but he still is a top 30 player for me at the moment, and he's a damn good one. So if the Panthers go that route, I mean, I'll obviously say, hey, why not just go like I think edge rusher's pretty damn solid down the board. So I would say second round, you could easily snipe one, and not really a Mason Graham level talent. Granted, not a Mykel Williams talent, but I think the drop off is significantly less. But I digress. I mean, that's me defending Mason Graham, which I'm not usually the type to do. But it is what it is. New Orleans goes Shedeur Sanders. If you end up putting Kellen Moore on the squad, I think Shedeur Sanders fits his style arguably better than the quarterbacks on the team. It gives you a new direction. Spencer Rattler doesn't necessarily look like he's him, but for the pick that they spent on him, good return on investment, honestly. You got yourself a really good backup quarterback in the 5th round. It makes sense. Derek Carr, this is literally going to be Derek Carr. Just like younger, higher potential, because at least we've kind of seen what Derek Carr is nowadays. So I would say, if this does happen, I'd stick with Derek Carr or like Spencer Rattler, and then just go after Tyler Warren. Tetairoa McMillan is probably the one I would really want to go after. But, you can't blame a team at number 9 for taking a swing on a quarterback that is now, I guess we're conditioned to believe, a top 3 pick. Bears going Armand Membu at 10. I just don't know if I could fully, I've had a total phase shift for the Bears. I'm not going to blame them if they go interior offensive line with some like tackle versatility, but I would just say, I mean, if we're going to assume that guard is worth the 6th pick, then it's pretty fair to say that, they could be worth the 10th. But I personally, I don't know, man. I mean, this is where Tyler Booker would have been like a crazy pick, but it's like, okay, it fits with the value of my board, and the Bears could absolutely use that type of super weapon on the offensive line. So I would just say, I would push against it, but offensive line, if it happens, it's like, okay, I'm not going to give it a bad grade, but you have Mason Graham on the board. And so I just don't really see the comparative value with those picks. Number 11, the Niners go Mason Graham. I mean, you guys know I've been pretty much clamoring for Mason Graham since pick 7 at this point. But, it's a good pick. Great pick. Kind of the dream pick, I should say. And so Saleh gets his guy. I like it. Cowboys getting Ashton Jeanty, kind of old but gold, man. It's boring, but it's old but gold. There's a reason for it. Not many teams are looking for that Jeanty style back. And, I mean, he is a special kind of running back. He really is. I mean, even in his last game versus Penn State, 30 carries for 99 yards. You talk about the 2 fumbles, absolutely worth some criticism there. And, yards per carry, that is sub 3.3, but 16 missed tackles forced. That's over 50%, like, touch to missed tackle rate. That is insane. That is something he could control. So I got to give him some more credit than what I think he's getting right now. Malachi Starks goes to the Dolphins. Another old but gold pick. Holland, gone. And then also Poyer, gone. So it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can't complain about it. He is a really good player. Again, it gets boring, but not from Cynthia because this is her first mock draft. It gets boring from guys like me who end up doing it all the time. So I understand that. Colts going Tyler Warren. This is the dream situation. I highly doubt he is here, solely because I think teams are going to learn their lesson and, understand that the value of an elite level tight end is worth a lot more than what I think we're kind of portraying it. Brock Bowers fell, and that's what people say. Oh, well, he should be here because Brock fell. Brock shouldn't have fallen. Like, are you saying, well, I guess you could say that the NFL is pretty arrogant to the point where they wouldn't learn from their mistake and be like, it's just, it's a one-off, it's a skewed thing. Like, this is the best of the best. Well, Tyler Warren probably could be a top 5 tight end in the NFL. Like, it's very realistic that he could be, at the very minimum, a top 10 tight end. And you can't find those out in the open market. So sometimes you got to spend a premium pick to get somebody who is inaccessible in terms of where the talent level that you can acquire at that position. And I think it's great. It's the dream pick. Falcons going Jalen Walker. I would not classify him as an edge. I would classify him as a linebacker. And so, I like the versatility. I think the Falcons, especially with the limited amount of picks they have, if they have to stick and pick, it's going to be the best possible outcome because you're getting essentially 2 players in one, which we almost say that as a guaranteed positive. I know there are guys like Isaiah Simmons who took a very long time to find their calling, but with a guy like Jalen Walker, being a polished linebacker is the best foundation you can ask for because rawness at edge is acceptable, right? You look at certain situations where, you could even use Jalen on the defensive line and then you can drop him into coverage and stuff and allow him to be the linebacker that he is already. So I like that idea. And for the Falcons, if you do have a limited amount of picks, I would just say, you got to do what you got to do. And being able to get 2 players for 1, and especially with the most talent level at the position that I would say is the hardest, I like that. I like the odds. James Pierce Jr. goes to the Cardinals at 16. Kind of a dream pick right there. James Pierce is my number 3 player in the class, technically number 2. I mean, I boost Abdul Carter because, people didn't understand, and also the vision for Abdul Carter. He's not going to be the primary run defender as an edge. Technically, James Pierce could be. So that's why I'm just going to leave it as is. But James Pierce, number 2, number 3 player in the class, whichever way you want to view it. Amazing value there. Great pick for the Cardinals. Tetairoa McMillan somehow slides to 17. Let's ignore that fact because the guys fall in the draft. It happens. And then look at the fact that you could replace T. Higgins perfectly. I know that, Tetairoa, I could have named a billion teams before that should have been in the mood to take him. And he's very similar to Abdul Carter, another one of these players that I've boosted up because I know the role that he's going to play. And so you don't need to necessarily play like, oh, well, this is my holistic grade. It's like, no, this player is locked into this role. Put the role that they're going to play on the board. And I'm like, okay, fine. So, he is my number 15 overall player, and he's a damn good one at that. Great hands, and he's pretty much been the most reliable weapon there for Arizona that they've had. I honestly wouldn't be surprised, with the way that the Niners are looking at T. Higgins, if somehow, some way, if he falls to 11, they're just like, we got Ricky. Debo's gotten fat. Ayuk has been relatively unreliable since we signed him. So it's like, we can kind of pair up Tetairoa, Ricky as well. Why am I forgetting the Arizona receiver that I love to death? Tetairoa's former teammate. I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, but it would be interesting to see them paired back up. But regardless, this would be a perfect T. Higgins replacement. I just doubt that he'd ever get to 17. 18 for the Seahawks, Donovan Jackson. I think that's great because he can play guard in the short run and tackle in the long if need be. or you can end up developing yourself a tackle there as well. Buccaneers going Mike Green makes a lot of sense. I mean, chef's kiss right there. Todd Bowles would love the speed to power and the tools that Mike Green brings to the table. I still think he needs to work on the quantity of moves. I think the toolkit is still very, very, very barren. But I mean, not many guys can generate speed to power the way Micah Green does. We obviously saw it in the Senior Bowl, but it wasn't just the rep where he sat Josh Connerly on his ass. It was every single rep, he showed more power than he had in the whole entire season for Marshall. So it was really good to see that. And I'm excited to see him in a role, especially for the Buccaneers. You put him with Todd Bowles. I think that you can end up having a lot of success. Broncos go Colston Loveland. Not going to complain. It makes sense. I would prefer Amari and Hampton, but that's just me. But again, you give your quarterback a reliable receiving weapon. He wanted a joker, which is an elite receiver at tight end or running back. Colston Loveland is an elite receiver, basically in terms of route running at that tight end spot. Not going to disagree. Emeka Egbuka goes to the Steelers. So I think I'll be perfectly happy living with this pick, right? Emeka's a great player, and he's used to playing in the elements. I think he'll be perfectly fine. But for the Steelers, I would be focusing more on a boundary weapon. Emeka is not immune from going to the boundary, but I just want him on a team where there's a legitimate role in the slot. You got Calvin Austin, you got Roman Wilson, and those guys aren't boundary receivers by any stretch of the imagination, which maybe that was our fault as the Steelers to be getting guys who are extremely role specific, right? You're not going to want to put those guys on the outside. Emeka could, but you want Emeka to be able to play in the slot a significant portion, just the way he did at Ohio State. And so maybe it is right to not to use a sunk cost fallacy and, basically acknowledge that, sometimes it's okay to call Roman Wilson not somebody who would stop you over an upgrade and then kind of have Roman Wilson be on the back burner. But I personally would say guys like Matt Golden, even though he's never played in the elements, does at least provide that boundary presence and allows for players like Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin to still be able to thrive in the slot. Chargers going Josiah Stewart, 22. Josiah had an incredible year statistically. I mean, talk about 27% pass rush win rate, 40% true pass rush win rate. I will just say, when I watched him, I was expecting to see fireworks. It was the most underwhelmed I've ever been with a player who had that level of statistic. And I don't know why, because I was a big Josiah guy coming into the year. He was my edge 8 coming into the year. Obviously, so many new guys got added to the list, so it's not remotely the same type of edge 8 presence that it would be now. But Josiah is a great player. I would love to see him on the Chargers. He was in the 3rd round for the Chargers in my most recent mock draft. I'm perfectly happy with that. But I will say it was the most underwhelming player I've ever watched with overwhelming statistics. So take with that as you will. Unique frame. We'll see what happens on draft day. Packers go Walter Nolan. Just recently did this in a mock draft. I'm not going to spoil for whom because they're dropping it tomorrow. But ended up going on another buddy's show to do a mock draft, and Walter Nolan went to the Packers. Kind of going to be more of that punchy defensive interior. The Packers fired their D-line coach. Don't think they're going to be giving up on him, but I also do think that the Packers are perfectly reasonable when it comes to taking best player available. And a lot of people view Walter Nolan as the best player at this moment. I think it would be a mistake over Ben Morrison, but also at the same time, Walter Nolan is a very good player. And he kind of proved me wrong a little bit. He still has so much to grow and learn. I mean, the dude's balance is absolute garbage. The dude's on the ground all the time because he's over leveraged. But I mean, you can't teach explosiveness and power. I thought that he showed it way better in the Senior Bowl than any time during the regular season in terms of consistency as well. So, he'll be a good Green Bay Packer if it does end up that way. Vikings going Ben Morrison would just be icing on the cake, letting the Packers, who probably won't even have Jair, because I'm pretty sure he said he doesn't want to be in Green Bay anymore. I saw a report a couple weeks ago about that. Feel free to deny it if any more news has come out and said it's kind of rubbish, but, kind of rubbing it in here for Minnesota, losing 3 corners. Probably going to get one of them back in Byron Murphy, but Ben Morrison wouldn't be playing that role, playing a true boundary role. He is fantastic. I mean, I don't get why people are that low on Ben Morrison. I know it's a hip injury, but dude's super young and he's a fantastic player. Like, he really is. Maybe he's just cashing out on the first round hype, but I mean, Ben Morrison should have been a top 5 pick next year, in my opinion. Worst case scenario, top 10. And so I feel like he got some good news this year. And it's like, dude, just come out. Houston Texans going Matt Golden. I mean, he was in Houston literally a year ago. Makes a lot of sense for a team that's been decimated in terms of the receiving core, reliability, in terms of health as well. So I could totally see it ending up working out that way. Rams going Josh Simmons, someone who's played left and right tackle, depending on what you want to do. Alaric Jackson, you could replace him. I do, like, some of my Los Angeles Rams fans have talked about how bringing back Alaric Jackson seems to be like priority number 1. And so, like, this is probably a Havenstein possible replacement as well, if you guys want to go that route. But Josh Simmons is a great player nonetheless. Continuing on, we got Kelvin Banks to the Baltimore Ravens. Values there. I mean, I think this is a reasonable range for Kelvin Banks. He's not going to test out all too well. He has a shorter frame. I mean, it's not impossible for him to slip to the spot. And for the Ravens, you could use him as a left tackle, but you could also use him as a guard if Stanley wants to return, which right now it looks like he's going to. At number 28, we got the Lions going Jack Sawyer. Old but gold, baby. It fits perfectly. I mean, you're talking about needing an edge too. Probably this pick, if they're going to go Jack Sawyer, I would just send it for Miles. I mean, if you could afford it, you're not really going to be using the second round pick to boost your team remotely to the level that Myles Garrett could over the edge rushers at 28. While at this spot, if the Browns had it, they can go Josh Connerly to play their left tackle spot. So it kind of would be a win-win in my opinion. Obviously, there would be more picks involved in that, but I think it'd be worth it. Commanders go Luther Burden at 29. Reasonable. This is another team looking for weapons. Do not want Olamide Zaccheaus being a legitimate weapon on this team. No disrespect to De'Ami Brown, who I love as well, but I mean, they made him work. And Jaden Daniels ended up elevating the receiving core. What if he didn't have to elevate the receiving core to be an NFL receiving core? What if he actually had an NFL receiving core and then elevated them to an elite level receiving core? Luther Burden would be a great addition for that. Bills going Kenny G at 30. Respect it. I mean, going high level defensive interior, never a bad move. I mean, you can never get mad at a team for taking reasonable shots in the trenches. I mean, just it makes sense. And then at 31, Philadelphia Eagles go Shamar Stewart. It'd be very intriguing because he'd essentially be both a Milton Williams as well as a Josh Sweat replacement. I'd be curious to see the role he would play early on, but they play a lot of nickel. So Shamar would be playing edge a notable amount of times, but he'd also probably on odd fronts be able to kick a little bit to the inside. I would love to see how that'd play out. And then Azareye'h Thomas, shout out from my boy. He is somebody who you guys know I've loved him for a while. He was my corner 4 coming into the year, and he proved it right. He had a couple of struggles day 1 and 2 of the Senior Bowl, talked about it with an inside source, and it was like, yeah, it's pretty much the pad level. So in like day 3 seemed to fix it, and he had a great day 3. And that's what a lot of NFL teams are really hoping to see. It's like, dude, is this guy, is it really going to be something that we're going to have to worry about? And it's like, nope. He's as good as he was at Florida State. Got to see him in person. He passed the eye test there, passed the eye test in Mobile on day 3. So I'm super excited for that. Will be a great pick there for the Chiefs. But that is going to be this part of the video. Hope you guys did enjoy a little bit of another Senior Bowl player, Taylor Elgersma. Welcome into the interview portion of this episode. We have the Canadian Tom Brady, Taylor Elgersma. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Yes, let's go. You have been from Canada. You have now played multiple years, including 39 games played, 10,230 yards, getting 76 passing touchdowns, 94 total, and 72% completion percentage. Welcome into the show. Senior Bowl invite. Feel free to go give your people an introduction.
Yeah. Obviously a Canadian kid, played 4 years at Laurier. Really proud that we were able to make the national championship this year and kind of go on a nice little run. And so I think, for me, it's been, an amazing experience this past week of the Senior Bowl, competing with the best of the best. And, I'm excited to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a massive list of accolades here that I am ready to read off, including you ended up having the Gridiron Showcase, but you literally got Canada's Heisman Trophy as well. You were literally the best player in the entire country. So shout out to you winning MVP awards here and there. I see MVP listed several times. So congrats to you on being able to actually catch the attention so much that you weren't invited to the Shrine. No disrespect to them. Shrine's a great event, but the Senior Bowl is known by many as the best of the best, and you've actually been able to capture that as well. So congrats to you on that. And obviously the burning question people will have is, like, first off, I know we talked about this off air, but like, have you faced American competition before? And if you haven't, which, spoiler alert, I assume you're about to say no, but like, what's the differences between Canadian football, American football, in terms of the tempo, the intensity, and just like the overall experience of the game?
Yeah, I mean, like you kind of just alluded to there, these are my first snaps of 11 on 11, throughout this time at these showcases. And really, the Senior Bowl being live and the level competition, those were really my first snaps of real, 11 on 11 ball. And so there's a lot of differences, even if you just talk about the rules differences. We have an extra guy in Canada, 12 on 12, 3 downs, bigger football, wider field, bigger end zones, just unlimited motion. There's a lot of, nuanced differences. But for me, the big thing that I noticed, and I had a couple days to adjust to was how tight the sidelines are, in the American field, and how tight the end zones are, especially with the speed and the quality of the DBs and the receivers at the Senior Bowl. Making sure the ball's getting up and down, on time, and making sure my feet are paired with my eyes. I think that all that was, important for me, and I think that throughout the week I definitely got better at that.
Perfect. Well, I mean, I remember watching, because everybody was having little rumors about the Canadian quarterback coming into the Senior Bowl. So on the first practice, I noticed on like some of your warm-up throws, you ended up missing a ball slightly, and then I ended up seeing you continue to work on your throwing mechanics like mid rep, which I did love to see, like in the middle of your little throwing session. And is that something that has been continually tweaked? I know you're working out in Alabama. Like, is there going to be a little bit of a difference to quarterback mechanics the way the U.S. teaches it versus Canadian, or is it kind of more of something that you've been continually progressing through?
Yeah, I don't think it's an American Canadian thing. I think it's just, you're always, as a quarterback or any position, you're trying to refine your mechanics and become more, efficient thrower in my case. And for me, it's a lot of that stuff that you see is just mental cues for myself, making sure, I'm keeping a close, shoulder nice and tight upper half, so that I can rotate properly through. And so sometimes I'll just talk myself through that. If I notice, I'm missing high route on a rep, I'll make sure that I'm, just kind of feeling that out after. And so, yeah, I think that's just a process that every athlete has to go through and invest in. I think that, no matter what level you're at, if you're not, still doing that, then you're probably not doing it right. So.
True that. True that. Love that type of mentality right there. So, one of my favorite plays actually from when I was watching you at the Senior Bowl was actually one of your missed throws, where if someone was just sitting back watching it and not actually watching what you were doing or even how you reacted after the rep, they might just say that was a bad ball. But I remember you were actually rolling out to the right, I believe, and Jalen Lane, if I'm not mistaken, was just running a drag, and you ended up throwing it behind him. And initially, you're like, well, that was a bad ball, but I saw you pointing back to him to essentially, or I think you actually pointed at the corner to show, hey, you're supposed to sit down. You're about to run right into the corner. And I love the fact that you essentially were processing what was going to happen after the catch, and we're trying to get on the same page. It was still early in practice. It's not a shot at Lane at all, but I love the fact that you are already trying to make plays. Jackson Dart is known for this. Like, you'll see where he'll actually throw a ball away from where the route is supposed to go to be able to throw his guys open and be basically that playmaker. Do you think that is something that, well, first off, let me see, did I get that right? But second off, is that one of your biggest strengths, or is there something that you love even more than your playmaking ability?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, when you talk about that rep, yeah, we had like a deep over going on off a boot action. And, there was a kind of a cloud corner over there kind of robbing that, that over. And so that was something that we hadn't really, talked about, was what our rules were going to be on that. If receivers have the ability to kind of tempo their route or fully shut it down and protect themselves from a cloud corner. And so, yeah, I kind of threw that ball anticipating that we were going to get, some sort of shutdown off that corner. And so, yeah, just talking with him through that, and kind of explaining what I was seeing. And so then next time, if we got that in the game, we'd be on the same page and be able to, throw that thing on his back shoulder and get a first down. And so I think that's definitely a huge part about my game, but also about, the quarterback position in general. And I take a lot of pride in, being an operator and communicator of the offense. And I think that, that's just part of that. You got to get to know your guys, and that your guys got to trust you. And I think that, communicating with them through like looks that you're seeing, versus how they're seeing it, and then, just working together to be on the same page is definitely something that, is a strength of mine.
Right. And I'm curious because, I mean, obviously this is my second Senior Bowl, so I don't really know about a bunch of the pre-process that goes on. these are some of your first throws to these guys as well, correct? You guys don't have an extensive training period beforehand where you get to understand those tendencies, where you get to have those conversations and you get to build up that chemistry. So it is going to be a little bit more in terms of getting to feel each other out on the first day, correct?
Yeah, I mean the first time we ever really ran routes was on the field on the first day. You know,
Right.
we met up in the hotel and went over to the convention center hallway and, threw a couple, get loose, stand there and catch for me as we were, quarterbacks are going through their routine type of thing, but nothing with any timing or route running or anything like that before we step on the field. And so I think for sure that's, part of day one, and throughout the entire week is getting, used to your guys. But that's also, I think, what, scouts and evaluators want to see is, how can they take an environment that's uncomfortable and become as comfortable as possible in it.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, how long do you think it takes on average for yourself to get used to the exact speed? Like, obviously, you can end up throwing adequately within a day or two, but to really have that sixth sense to where you could throw it right on the money, know exactly where they're going, how long does that usually take for yourself? And if you understand, like in general, like maybe in general for more other quarterbacks as well?
I think that, to be honest with you, it's a lot of like people thing, like some receivers, you meet up with them on day one and it just clicks and you can tell like right away. I can tell how this guy's running his routes. I can see his breaks clearly. We have that speed. We're on the same page. And some guys it takes a little bit longer. And I think that like throughout the course of a season, you hope that by the first week of camp, by the end of training camp, you understand where your receivers are going to be, how they're coming out of their breaks, and sometimes it takes a little longer just based on if that receiver hasn't played in a similar system or if he's just a different, he's in a step faster than what guys have ever played with. Like, but I think a lot of it is just getting that trust and comfortability to where like that you can coach each other up about where the receivers like the football, where the quarterback's eyes are going to be, and then also just timing up those breaks. And so I think at the Senior Bowl this week it was fun getting to know some of those guys. Some guys we click with right away, like Arroyo, the tight end from Miami. I had pretty good touch and timing with him, right off the bat. And so some of it's just a personnel thing too.
Yeah, I mean, Arroyo ended up having a fantastic week. Obviously, he was another big shiner at the Senior Bowl. Now, I'm curious, like, obviously, you're not going to be 100% perfect. Nobody's 100% perfect. Even Arroyo, who was like the star of the show for the receivers, ended up having a drop on day one, right? Now, what did you think your like one area that you wanted to improve the most on that you didn't just get to be like exactly where you wanted? Like, what was the area that left you the most wanting that you're going to try to prove through the pre-draft process?
Yeah, for sure. For me, it's I feel like day one I was able to show off the arm and also showcase that my eyes were in the right spot. But I think the one thing is I need to continue to show that my feet are going to move at the same tempo as my eyes. I know that my eyes are in the right spot with a lot of these concepts, but part of that, is feeling that smaller field and feeling the timing of the American game. The ball's going to come out a little bit faster out of my hands, and I think that it's not a release thing and it's not a eyes thing. It's just a footwork thing. And so making sure that all my movement drops, all my play action drops, all my under center footwork, all that is working together to make sure the ball is coming out of my hand at the right time. And so that's for me something that I want to keep working on.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of quarterbacks, even in the NFL, starting quarterbacks are still working on their footwork as well. I mean, it's just a perpetual like cycle of just a self-improvement, like you talked about earlier, even with your upper mechanics as well. I mean, it is a whole body thing. People always talk about, oh, I love a quarterback that even stationary can flick the ball 50 yards. It's like, well, you also still need to have the quarterback that can use their lower body to propel it further as well. So I think it's super awesome that you're at least self-aware of the fact that you can continue doing that. And then you add this whole new factor compared to American quarterbacks where you're having to play on a different field,
Yeah.
right? So it is something where you're still training your mind and your body to be able to respond to that appropriately. Now, do you look at those type of challenges as something that could be a little bit more frustrating? I know it's going to be always an exciting challenge ahead, but is it sometimes where you're like, I wish I were progressing faster? Or do you really feel like you are on track or even ahead of where you're at?
Yeah, I think I don't feel frustrated at all. I think that was something I was proud of was, being able to showcase even throughout those 3 days at the Senior Bowl practices, um, the improvements that my feet and eyes are going to be in the right spot and get the ball in my hands at the right timing. I think that day two I hit Tez on a nice through route, and that was because my feet and my base were good and ready to throw at the right time. And so I think that for me that's one of my strengths about my game and me as a person is I think that I excel at picking up the game fast, and I think that that's something that I wanted to make sure I showed this past week, and I hope that team can see that I'll develop very quickly underneath great coaching like I had this week.
Yeah, and adaptability is super duper key. Obviously, we've seen guys like even Baker Mayfield through the start of his career go through countless offensive coordinators, countless head coaches, and being able to adapt is an easy way to keep your job and be able, not on top of that, being able to be successful while trying to have some self-preservation there. Now, I'm curious, you always say that, like you've said several times, that you're someone who's a really good worker and you're very adaptable. Like, who was the one who gave you that drive? Like, who do you model yourself after? Maybe it doesn't even have to be a player. Is it something that like my parents instill in me, my type of work ethic? Like my mom was a single mom of 2 kids living on her own in a car at 20 years old. And now she's like pretty much the breadwinner. She's an absolute badass. So for me, that's my type of motivator. But for you, who is the one who's gotten you to be as awesome as you are now and continuing to give you that motivation to go forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple people that jump to my mind. Obviously, my parents, you kind of touched on it there, that I feel like, the environment you're raised in is really important to who you turn out to be. And my dad, definitely instilled hard work in me. And my mom, is one of my, if not my biggest supporter every single step of the way, encouraging me. And so I definitely want to give a shout out to them and in helping, me through this entire process. But also I think that, for me, a lot of it's just, I'm a process oriented guy. And I learned that from my coach, Michael Falls. He kind of taught that in me, is that, being process oriented is one of the most important things that you can do. And so, you'll never regret your results if you just, make sure that you're giving everything you have to the process, enjoying the process. And so I think that, falling in love with that aspect of football and that aspect of working hard is just, what makes working hard easy. I get up and do the right things every single day because it's, who I've set out to be. It's not based on motivation levels, whether things are going good or things are going bad. It's just this decision and commitment that you made. And so when you do the right things daily, then you're going to yield good results.
What about your routine are you most proud of? Is there like something about you consistently waking up in the morning at, 6 a.m. or is it the fact that you're able to say yes to veggies, like no to fried foods? Like what are you the most proud of and something that you would say other people should try to adopt as well?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it'd be in the film room. I think that's one thing I would tell all young quarterbacks, is that the most important thing that you can do to become a better quarterback is to understand the game better, understand your offensive system better, understand the defenses that you're going against better. And so, I had a very strong commitment to making sure that I was in the film room. I was with my offensive coordinator for an extra 2 hours, 3 hours, a day. They're just talking through offense, talking through installs, talking through what we were going to see that week and evolving our offense. Even in the off season, we met, very, very consistently almost every day to talk through, what we were feeling, even that week, and just look at ideas and grow together as, our offensive scheme grew. And I think that that's one thing I would definitely pass on to, younger quarterbacks, is commit to being really close with your coaches and learning the game and then getting better in the film room.
That's great. And over the past year, since you've already had so much success, what really propelled you to the level that you are now? Like, what was the area that really you would give credit to giving you the most success to where you are currently?
Yeah, I think it would kind of, tie back to what I was talking about there. I got the experience of being at, 3 professional training camps in the CFL, and, 2 with the Toronto Argonauts and 1 with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And I think, learning a professional playbook, being a professional for 6 weeks of the off season, going through film with them, going through practices, going through Skelly, going through team, all this stuff, being a pro for 6 weeks at a time, every single one of my off seasons really developed me as a pre-snap, processor. And I think that, being able to understand my offensive scheme, the defense that we're going against, and being able to, understand where I want the ball to go pre-snap, and at least, narrow my eyes so that I have a progression and a strong decision-making process every single time I'm in the gun, I think allowed me to have a lot of success over my university career. And I think I would attribute that to the work I put in, at those training camps, learning those playbooks and those coaches that, put in effort into me.
That's awesome. Now, I'm curious, like I've asked a lot of players before at different positions. You're the first quarterback to come on the show. So I'm testing out some fun little questions to see if like we're gonna continue using them in the future. But if you were to have one player throughout all of NFL history that you would want to throw to, what would be your dream receiver? Like, I'm curious if you have someone that comes to mind is like you think of like, yeah, I'm gonna make the touchdown, like the touchdown throw in the Super Bowl. It's overtime. Who do I want to throw it to? Like, what's my dream like highlight career moment?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of, obviously stud receivers out there that you could pick.
Oh yeah.
Megatron would maybe come to mind, or Julio, one of those freak guys that you can just throw it up to, let them go make a play, and have a lot of confidence that when you
Mhm.
give them a chance, they're going to come down with it.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, obviously being able to see like Megatron, I still remember when they ended up putting like 5 guys on Megatron for one play, and I was like, this is just ridiculous. Like the thing is, he probably still would get open even if you wanted him to. But being able to be with someone of that type of phenom. And if I'm not mistaken, Chase Claypool was formerly Canadian as well, because he was nicknamed Mapletron. Like obviously did not have the career arc. I'm a Steelers fan, so it's like he's near and dear to my heart because he gave us Joey Porter Jr. and a couple years of being badass. So I mean, like he screwed everybody else over, but he made my life good. So I have a very positive opinion of him. But what is another Canadian player that you would say you want to be able to follow their career path, if not go even more a step further and kind of be the name coming out of Canada for American football?
Yeah, I think that, two guys actually that I think of are a couple of brothers that are from my hometown of London, Ontario, Chase and Sid Brown.
Mhm.
Chase is obviously, taken over the reins over there in the backfield and has had an outstanding year. And then
Yep.
obviously Sid's about to play for a Super Bowl. And so, I think just, seeing them and kind of their progression in the league and their progression as they came over to the States and kind of led the way as Canadians in the NFL, I think that, those would be two guys that I would give a shout out to.
No, those guys are fantastic. Also 0% body fat. It is ridiculous. Those dudes,
Yeah.
like, I mean, like, damn, they never eat a cheeseburger. It's just ridiculous, man. But no, those guys are absolutely phenomenal. Again, Sidney Brown literally playing for a Super Bowl this Sunday, which is incredible. But yeah, I mean, I feel like that's all the questions that I necessarily have. Is there anything that you want to put back out there? And then, obviously feel free to say goodbye, have your final pitch there, let people know exactly the type of guy you are. So far, I've enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure everybody else has too.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you having me on. I guess if I was just going to say a final pitch about myself, I would just kind of say what I've been saying to teams the entire week is just that, the guy that I am is, an elite processor and a leader that, brings a passion and a toughness to the game and the position that I think is pretty unique. And I think that, I'm a guy that, like I said, is going to develop quickly. And I think, my work ethic and my love for the game are going to drive me to elevate myself within whatever building I get brought into. And so, I think that would just be, obviously my tape, can speak for myself, and the physical traits people, everyone can evaluate those for themselves. And I have a lot of confidence that when you watch my tape, you're going to be, impressed. But I think that the biggest selling point for me is who I am as a person. And so I think that's what I would leave it with.
Hell yeah, dude, that was smooth. I can tell that you've told a couple teams that before. That was not off the rip, man. If it was, that was even more impressive. But thank you again for coming on, Taylor. And again, for those of y'all who are wanting to be able to follow Taylor more, what socials can they find you on?
Yeah, on IG, Taylor Elgersma, or on Twitter, Elgersma Taylor.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we'll be obviously tagging that in the video as well as in the post. So for those of you who are watching, again, feel free to go check him out. Thank you again, Taylor. We love you guys. See you on the far side. Peace.
Appreciate you.